Alrighty, we are live. You know, it's an interesting week when your phone starts blowing up just because of one headline. The government announces a $35 billion change to the NDIS. And suddenly I've got clients, friends, people in the space reaching out and saying, mate, what's going to happen to NDIS special disability accommodation now? Will your business model still work? Goro, there's not going to be any more people left on the NDIS. And you know what? To be fair, if all you saw was that headline, you'd probably think the same. Because when the numbers get thrown around like that, it really sounds like something major's been taken away. So tonight, I just want to take a chill pill with that a little bit and really break it down. So we're going to look into what actually changes within the NDIS, what that means specifically for SDA housing, and then we're going to zoom out into a couple of other conversations that came up this week around co-living and tax, right? Especially those changes around negative gearing and CGT and all that sort of stuff. For those that don't know me, my name's Gaurav Gupta, CEO and founder of Ethical Property Investments. We work with everyday Aussies who want to build strong, high cash flow property portfolios while also focusing on housing that serves a real purpose and holds up over the long term. So grab a drink, settle in, and let's break this down properly. Now, before we get started with the party, you know the deal. If you've watched me before, we've got a drink today. We have Bilson's Cheeky Mango Low Sugar Triple Distilled Vodka. That's right. Perfectly sparkling, according to the tagline. Let's be the judge of that today. Alrighty. And those that have joined me on Properties and Beers before, you know the deal. I need it in a glass with some ice. It is very yellow. It's probably one of the most yellow things I've seen. They look like they added turmeric into this. So it's going to be interesting. Let's give it a go. And fingers crossed it looks as good as the outside. By Bilson's Aussie company in Beechworth in Victoria. Fantastic products usually. So let's give it a go. Cheers, guys. Wow, that's super sweet. I don't know who said low sugar, but that is wow, it's super sweet. I like the mango-ness of it. In fact, I like the mango-ness of this better than some of the other mango drinks that I've had. But it's just sweet. I know it says low sugar, but damn, wow. I'll still keep drinking it. Right? So let's chat about the $35 billion NDIS budget reform. Look, the government announced a $35 billion cut, and suddenly everyone thinks the whole space is collapsing. Like I said earlier, my phone was going up. I was getting these text messages, WhatsApp messages from friends and family. Your model won't work anymore. There won't be any more participants left. What happens to specialist disability accommodation now? And I get it. If all you see the headline, that's where your mind goes, right? But when you actually look at what changes, it's a very different picture. The NDIS is actually being tightened, right? They're moving toward more functional assessments, focusing funding on the people with permanent disabilities, right? And you know what? That's the exact group we've always built for. So while the headline talks about cuts, what we're seeing is a clearer definition of who the scheme's really for. Most of the panic is coming from a number and nothing to do with the detail behind it. You hear 160,000 people might exit the scheme, and it sounds massive, right? I don't know that there's still going to be 5 to 600,000 people left on the scheme, right? No one really stops to ask, who are the people being exited from the scheme? Well, the thing is, if you're not sure and all you've done is you honestly just read the headline, a large portion of those are participants with who are these individuals with higher functional capacity, people with a low level of disabilities, and some of them non-permanent disabilities, right? Especially, children, for example, right? These people most of these people, almost all of them, I guarantee you, will not require any form of specialist housing. SD's always been on the top end of need under the NDIS, really talking about the top 5% of people with the most profound disabilities. So when eligibility tightens, it actually also sharpens the need for SDA housing. And, for an investor, that gives you more clarity around where the demand actually is. So we've never actually been building for the group that's being phased out. When we looked at the changes, nothing about who we designed for and what we needed to do really needed to change, right? That's because from the start, our focus has been on participants with permanent and significant disabilities. That, my friends, is a cohort that requires purpose-built housing, long-term housing. So rather than being exposed to this broad change in the scheme, you're operating in a very defined segment. That's what we're doing, right? That's a different level of stability when chasing general NDIS demand with the fly-by-nighter operators, which brings me to the next one, right? So God damn, that's sweet. Um, but I still, I'm brown. I love mango, right? So the other big shift is that you get to see who operates these things, right? So over the yeah, once the people got past the announcement, the next question was, what happens to all the providers? Well, mandatory registrations coming in, more audits and more oversight. And to be honest, I think that's a good thing. I actually see that as a positive. Look, we've partnered with established registered providers, especially Empowered Livability, which is the other business that I'm also involved in, right? Empowered Livability really understands compliance, the long-term responsibility that comes with housing participants properly. They are the gold standard for disability housing. I'm so proud to be associated with them because they held up what participants need, giving them choice and controls, and also keeping the providers honest. Because look, here's the thing, right? When standards go up, it becomes harder for inexperienced operators to stay in the space. And for investors, that makes you partner who you partner with even more important. And I saw some, really top quality, skilled providers and care providers on my Facebook the other day, just yesterday. They're like, oh, thank God these changes are coming in, right? So it's like the good providers actually welcoming these changes. Now, there is policy-driven fear, right? Headline-driven fear, right? There's a lot of that stuff coming on, right? And but you know what? Let's shift gears a bit because the next one did not come from the government. The next topic is coming from the public. By the way, if you've got any comments or questions about any changes to the NDIS, feel free to drop them in the chat. Drop them in the chat here, right? So sometimes the strongest reactions come from people who we've seen things done in the wrong way. We had another comment on one of our co-living ads this week. Actually, you may have noticed we've been getting a few controversial comments week after week, right? Here's what the guy said. Pathetic. Oh, I'm going to read this right? Pathetic. You rent a house out to multiple people, block streets, and so I'm reading from the other screen, right? Pathetic. You rent the house out to multiple people, block streets with car spots, cause chaos, not approved for purpose in council lives. It's an insurance risk, a liability risk, and a neighboring nuisance. And you know what? He kind of left a bit of a borderline racist comment after that, which I won't go into. I mean, this is Properties and Beers, not Lussian land, right? So we can ignore comments like that, or we can actually unpack them properly. But, this is Properties and Beers. And I have fun with this stuff, right? Why not? Underneath all that racist tones, there actually just might be some real concerns. And if you're an investor looking at Colin, you've probably thought about some of them yourself, right? And so some of these concerns, actually a lot of these concerns are valid in a poorly set up property, that is, right? We've all seen examples, too many tenants, not enough parking, neighbors getting frustrated. That's what happens when people chase numbers without thinking through the setup, right? Now, I want to be clear, right? Good co-living doesn't automatically mean more tenants equal more rent. It comes down to proper design, privacy for each resident, clear house rules and tenant matching, and hey, enough off-street parking. And when these are in place, the experience is completely different. Now, the other thing is, we have to get council approval for these properties, right? It's not like these are illegal share houses. That's what we're moving away from. That's the pardon my French. That's the shit that should not exist. Right? We shouldn't have illegal share houses, right? The kind of houses so many people move into when they first move into the country, if they're for immigrants and if they're, students, they live in a lot of illegal share houses, right? Where you have 5, 6 people crammed into this 3-bedroom house. That's not what we're talking about, right? With proper co-living, we're talking about the right space, the right dignity for everyone, and proper space, car parking space, as per the rules and regulations. And councils get involved and they make sure everything's done right before the property gets approved, right? That's what working with a high quality, property strategist can really help you with. So the real risk sits in how the property is actually structured. A lot of investors don't realize how much actually goes on behind the scenes. We're not just talking about actually leasing rooms. You've got to consider what the local council wants, right? Like I mentioned before, the right insurance structure, because you can't just get regular insurance. How the lease is set up, professional management. And these are all part of making sure the property runs over time. And it can be overwhelming, right? And part of that thing, why I created ethical property investments, is to help people get over that overwhelm And so there's just so much junk and so much misinformation out there about this space. It's by watching videos like these, understanding who are the people that have done it in the past, ask them their experience. And look, by the way, I've been in the co-living space, in the rooming house space since 2017, 2018. So it's been a little while now, right? My thoughts are, if a strategy creates problems for the people around it, it's not worth repeating. And that's where the conversation goes beyond just talking about returns. When done properly, co-living can provide more affordable housing options, give tenants flexibility and privacy, reduce pressure on rental markets, and go a long way, and this is the most important thing, to ease the housing crisis we currently have, right? And I see these comments going, oh, to ease the housing crisis, just stop immigration. I'm sorry, this crisis was 20 years in the making, right? You can't just stop immigration. That'll fix the housing crisis. No, it won't. This happened systematically over 20 years. You could pause immigration. That ain't going to fix the housing crisis, right? Call it what you will. And I get passionate about this topic, as you can tell, right? Sure, pause it, whatever, right? That ain't going to help the housing crisis. So here's my thoughts, right? When you see, when you have one or two people taking up a large 4-bedroom house, which historically has been, let's move to the burbs, et cetera, that takes away housing for families that desperately need actual houses. Like mum and dad with 2 kids, they need a house. They can't live in a tent city or a co-living house. But here's the thing, a single or a couple can, and that's what co-living truly addresses. It ends up freeing up more housing for the people that genuinely need it, the families that are otherwise pushed into places that they shouldn't be pushed into, right? And it doesn't actually take away from the families. It adds to the more housing for families, despite some of the social media comments I've been seeing recently. And look, as someone who invests in co-living, I believe you're building something that works for you, and also the people living in it and around it. And as for the comment itself, sometimes frustration comes out in ways that really isn't constructive, but it doesn't change the responsibility we have as investors to do the things properly, right? Let me chat to you about a concept I came up with a few years ago, and it's really changed how I operate business, and probably was, one of the things why I formed Ethical Property Investments. It's the idea of commonwealth, right? What does commonwealth mean? Well, break it down into 2 words. It's common wealth, right? So I believe as an investor, once you've reached a certain place in life, a certain wealth standard, you should do something that raises the commonwealth of our country. That, my personal motto, do good and make money. That's actually what it's all about. Creating solutions that does good for the society and, yes, your wallet at the same time. What a concept, right? So we've looked at policy fear, public perception, and the last one's a little bit broader. And it's all about, guess what? The media again and how it gets framed. So I'm going to continue chatting about some of the interesting taxes I've seen and my perspective. Again, turn on the news today, and it's easy to think property is the root of every economic evil. You hear the same 2 things on the negative gearing and capital gains tax. It all feels like every problem in the country's blamed on investors. And I call bullshit on that. You have less investors means you have less housing. In fact, I was watching something today. The government's over 60,000 houses behind on its yearly targets to build. Who the hell's going to build them? It's the investors, right? You got to look at the math differently. Property's just more than one gear. Property's just one gear in a bigger machine, right? Every country handles it their own way, right? So we look at taxes, right? Let's look at Norway. They've got a massive cushion from the gas exports. Yes, I mentioned Norway, massive cushion from the gas exports. So pressure on their sectors doesn't look anything like ours. The headlines usually miss the point because they focus on what's easy to explain. It's easy to get, hey, let's just tax the average punter more. Yes, those guys who don't follow punters' politics, I love his stuff. You guys might think, well, you're talking about property investment in following punters' politics. Hey, I don't need to belong to a team. I don't need to belong to Labor or Liberal. I belong in what belongs in my head. And I encourage you to as well. Don't belong to a team politically, right? Because when you belong to a team, they control you. You don't control what you control in your head. And going back onto it, it's easy to talk about property taxes because that affects everyone. But the government has dozens of revenue streams. Property is just one of the easiest to shout about and make a big noise about. And at the end of the day, I believe we should be taxing some of these multinationals a hell of a lot more than what we're doing. They're not going to go away from the country, right? You tax the top end of investors more, guess what they're going to do? They're going to go away and stop investing or even move out of the country. Like I've had a lot of successful entrepreneur friends do, right? You know, investor, I believe though, you've just got to stop reacting to the latest policy and see the whole system for what it is. Rules are going to change. That's just the way things go. And most of the things get grandfathered in. So if you've been doing this for a while, you actually get to see the cycles because rules tighten, then they shift. The investors who actually stay in the game don't rely on one specific tax break to make the deals work. Like negative gearing, I've been shouting about this since I started 10 properties in 10 years, over a decade ago. Negative gearing will die eventually, and slowly it's dying. And the death knell might just be what they're going to call on soon, right? So most successful investors care about cash flow and demand. And most importantly, they buy assets that make sense even when the government moves the goalposts. And that's how you build something that actually lasts. And look, really, it comes down to what you're trying to build. If you're just chasing a tax deduction, are you creating housing that people actually need? And that's where the doing good part of our strategy actually fits in. Whether it's special disability accommodation for people that need help with severe disabilities, or co-living to help with rental affordability, that, my friends, is a real work. So when you look at all this together, policy, perception, and media, it really comes down to how you choose to process that information. Or if you live in the Tony Robbins world, we call the reticular activating system. If you haven't heard about it, Google it. There's so much I could talk about in the future, right? And what you're focused on. And I believe you should be focused on long-term value. Yes, and I believe leveling up a commonwealth is all part of, what we should be focusing on. And look, there's always going to be noise. The headlines are loud and the opinions are even louder, right? Check out any of the Facebook comments. And the rules, they get to change constantly. The trick, my friends, is knowing how to filter that out. You need to see what actually moves the needle on your strategy and where the real risks could be hiding. And look, that, my friends, is the only way to make a solid decision. So if this has helped you see things more clearly, we talk about this stuff all the time. And to be honest, most people watching right now haven't followed our page yet. So if you want to stay across what's happening and to think it through properly, jump over to our page, Ethical Property Investments. Follow us on Facebook and Insta. We put out content consistently to help you stay informed and make better decisions over time. So if you got something out of tonight, follow the page. Appreciate you being here. Enjoy the rest of the evening, and we're going to see you on the next Properties and Beers. Cheers, guys.